Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you're watching this webinar. But I want to introduce myself. My name is Dave Nagel, and Larry Ainsworth had forwarded me some information that you were requesting, kind of looking at some of the research specifically to what really drives actions in PLC settings. So I'm going to walk you through some of a abbreviated slide presentation that I've done a couple times now at the annual Visible Learning Institute that really focused on what actions drive collective teacher efficacy. Just a little bit about me. I've been in education for about 18 years, middle school and high school teacher and administrator, twice gone through certification with Visible Learning. And I've also had I've been very fortunate to have worked with Larry from the almost start when he began unwrapping standards and power standards and prioritizing. I worked with Larry as a teacher, an administrator, and certainly now as a professional developer presenting his material for the last about 16 years now. I just wanted to put out there my cell phone number and my email as well. If you have any thoughts or questions to go deeper with this, more than happy to share that with you. I'm very familiar with where Oregon is going. I did some CFA work on several levels with Colin Cameron in the last year, so just wanted to connect you there with my contact information. The one thing before I walk you through just a couple of pieces here, and I know Larry has sent out the document and then some information from one of my colleagues and clients, Karen Flores from Valley View. But as we think about collective teacher efficacy, the number one thing we have to acknowledge is that people's perceptions and beliefs are going to be the predictors of whether or not they're going to be making the kind of adjustments and changes in their classroom practices that's really going to drive what's going to have the best impact on student learning. And when we look at collective teacher efficacy, it really is that belief collectively that when we come together as a group, we're going to get the best results out of our students. Comes in at 1.57. But when we look at any of Hattie's research, those numbers really just scratch the surface. That just tells us, when we averaged all of these studies and influences, what it got us. But a couple of points that I want to mention, going back to some of the deep empirical research that was cited in some of these studies, but they play such a major role, these efficacy expectations, the amount of effort teachers will expend and how long peers will sustain that effort when dealing with stressful situations. And so why this is so important is we have students that come with us with varying degrees of challenges, and often teachers miss that they're getting it. It's a long school year, and I think this is the time of year, especially in the winter for most districts, where it's cold and it's dark when we're getting up and we're going to work. So that's why this is so important. And what really drives these three actions that I've cited here, and even had John Hattie kind of give it a kind of a thumbs up approval of his endorsement of these, really come down to, number one, teachers have to apply new knowledge and develop mastery. There must be high degrees of positive interdependence. And then they must have fine-grained discourse around learning. And they can't just be looking at data or looking at assessment scores. It's really got to be looking at student work and really digging in. And what can unite all those are a common challenge. And so I'll walk you through just a few pieces, again, that I shared last summer at the VL Institute. The first one is teachers applying new knowledge. That if they only acquire it, very little is going to change. And we can take teachers off there. It could be just any of us. And so very often, I think we make some erroneous decisions in terms of how professional development went when we base the results of the professional development on the exit tickets at the end of the day. Teachers might have liked the slides and they might have liked the snacks, but it might not change their practice. And that the culture, the fellowship, and the leadership, and the climate really is essential. That's going to influence teacher learning, and that there's an expectation that when folks come to professional development, that they're going to be held accountable, but also supported in their learning. And a piece that I also go back to is Vivian Robinson's student-centered leadership. When leading teacher learning and development, 3 leadership capabilities, we're applying relevant knowledge. It has to be relevant and specific. And so I talk a little bit when I'm working with the CFA process and Larry's work, that it's got to be not only specific to their course of discipline, but it's got to be an assessment they're going to plan to use and implement and have enough time to do it well. And it should focus on solving a problem, a challenge that they're seeing in their students related to the standards. And by doing it collaboratively, and then both of us or the team implementing that assessment and looking at the results, really can build some relational trust. So again, I'm kind of leaning on some newer research as well. And one other one I wanted to mention here, one of John Hattie's mind frames is being a change agent. And one of the things a change agent does is they innovate. So when I look at this quote from Hadar and Brody, which I'm really fascinated with their work around PLCs and collaboration, but then when initial anticipation and curiosity turn into withdrawal, teachers seek comfort. And in that safe zone, they put a moratorium on innovation and consolidate what is known and passively learn new strategies. So what we have to be able to do as teachers are learning is help them conceptualize and make connections from what they've already been doing, or else it just becomes something that they front load with a little bit of information and then they just compartmentalize it and put it off to the side and don't even consider how they can implement or adapt new strategies. And I think that's an important word, adaption, not adoption. And also during this practice time, during our PLC settings, when teachers are working on new strategies and unwrapping standards and looking at pieces, whatever that is, that's when their strengths and weaknesses can be weighed. So that way in my peers, I'm acknowledging where I'm strong and I'm acknowledging where I'm struggling, and that builds deeper levels of efficacy. And I also like to cite Joyce and Shower's research from the 1980s, where the impact of teachers implementing a new skill into practice really didn't take off the ground even after they saw it presented or received feedback until there was job embedded coaching. And they even defined coaching back in the 80s, not as a defined instructional coach by position, but that it was ongoing and consistent. So our staff meetings, our faculty meetings, our early release time, and then back into our PLC settings, we're working on some of the same focus areas. And then during observations and walkthroughs, I'm getting feedback on how I'm implementing those strategies. It's critical that we kind of have that. Next is developing those structures to create positive interdependence. That idea of creating collective responsibility creates that proper peer pressure. So we have a common challenge that we're all focusing on certain things. And even though it might be more applicable to some of my students and less to another, but that focus there eliminates some of that isolation. We're coming back consistently on here's what I tried and here's how it was working because we defined it ahead of time. And I think we know far too often PLCs exist like this. And on a track team, no matter how far the shot putter throws or the high hurdler jumps, they really can't help each other. They can clap. What they do is they just collect their points and throw them in a pot. There's very little interdependence. And so sometimes we have to acknowledge how our administrators are leading our teams. And is the team held accountable for the seat time that they do, for the products that they produce? And I think in 2017, we can guide teachers more that they have certain tasks that they have to get done that they will have to meet. But between Google Docs and electronics and other ways that we can communicate, to empower our teachers to have the right amount of structured freedom and autonomy, because some teams need to meet more often at times, and others, it just leads to a little bit of being stifled. And so we focus them on here's the task we have to accomplish. How will we be monitoring if they're doing that well, and not just that they're filling out forms and completing tasks. So finally, that third piece, that fine-grained discourse and analysis of student work, not scoring, but analysis, to keep a focus and target learning while they can acknowledge the inherent ambiguity, open-endedness, and indeterminacy of social practice and learning. I love this statement by Little that describes learning is messy. We can't always see it exactly in the moment. We can't always say, well, it happened if they received 7 out of 10. It didn't if they received 6 out of 10. I think that's sometimes where we have to guide our teachers, and are they developing and making inferences around the best evidence that they're seeing from students. And so then finally, just a couple other points. We have to monitor the dialogue. When their dialogue is living more on focusing on the challenges versus focusing on working together, that's going to be a tipping point. And so we always have good days and bad days, and we always have folks that are maybe more positive than others. But where do our teams live? Where do they visit? Are they living more in the focusing on challenges, or are they living more on focusing on working together? And so when we help them develop common challenges, what I mean by this is focusing on some of the aspects of our school improvement plan, whether it's problem solving or reading comprehension or literacy or text analysis. That should be what is ongoing in their PLC data team, whatever those meetings are, that they're focusing their discussions on that. Because when we come together as a team, we can't collaborate around everything. So we collaborate on some of the real focus areas, and we keep coming back to that. And it doesn't just guide our efforts, it guides the passions of the team. And when we think about the CFA process, with identifying priority standards and unwrapping them, that can really identify the common challenge, and then collectively creating the post-assessment and the scoring guides and the pre-assessment can really be a nice catalyst. But then what Larry has done now, and we see in the framework, is very specific learning intentions as student success criteria for teacher clarity. And then, of course, we're going to evaluate and revise our assessment items. But those last two, the determining the learning progressions and planning quick progress checks, that's really where I've seen PLCs take off, because we spend time investing in whether or not whether or not we're going to use exit tickets, but how we're going to be looking at the information and evidence that is embedded within those exit tickets. So we're really monitoring ahead of time, what should we be looking for if the students are getting it? And so it really goes much deeper into just the assessment design process, but really is a place. And I've seen it firsthand in several districts that have implemented CFA 2.0 process well, really helped build some of that collective efficacy as teams were coming together, not just in the assessment design, but in the results along the way. So, and one other final piece that I wanted to just mention, because I think it's fascinating when we look at how we guide our administrators, and again, I think the CFA process can help, is where the discussions are going. So there's a concept that Horn and Little came up with called normalizing. Basically what they found was when someone comes to a PLC meeting and they say, I'm struggling, my kids can't understand fill in the blank, two-step equations, how to understand the Battle of the War of 1812, whatever that is. And then someone says, that's okay. It happens to all of us. By doing that, we make the challenge normal. It builds positive relationships. But what they found was that when somebody shares a challenge, the next discussion really drove whether or not there was an impact on the team. Did they go into learned helplessness, where we focus on the challenges, or well, we can't do that, or have you paid attention, just do the best you can? Or do they go into problem-based, solution-based conversation? So that's another thing as we think about guiding our teams. Where are they living and where are they visiting? That's a key element. So I had paused my recording there just for a second to move one of the final two slides around. So again, I hope that was useful and not too long, but a little bit of an overview that goes a little bit deeper. I had some other pieces, but in the interest of time, I wanted to keep it short enough. So please reach out to myself or Larry with any more questions or thoughts, and anything we can do to help, please let us know. Thanks so much. Have a great day.